Tonight's show seems to be about heroes. Every profession seems to have them. There was Johnny Appleseed for the farmers, and John Henry was for the railroad, and for mountaineers it was Davy Crockett. And for musicians, it was Phil Harmonic. Phil was a phenomenon, like nothing the world had ever seen before or ever will again. On the day Phil was born, he popped out of his mother, he sat right up, he said, "Bring me a violin!" Doctor never heard an infant talk before, so he got him a violin quick. And they handed him that fiddle, he whipped off a sonata, just like he was sucking his thumb. By the time he was 3, he'd mastered the violin and the piano. At 5, he was a virtuoso on every instrument in the symphony orchestra. At 7, he was already a legend. People came from all over the world to study music with Phil Harmonic. Soon he had so many students, he had to put them in groups. He put all his strings in one group, all his woodwinds in another, all his brass together, all his percussion together. That's how he started his Philharmonic Orchestra. And they were famous, not only for their flawless technique, but more for their ability to stir deep emotions in people. Phil's music could give a funeral director a laughing fit, or make a motorcycle gang cry like a bunch of babies. All in the way he played the notes. But they weren't just a playing orchestra either. They were a doing orchestra. Phil could do things with his music that doctors, lawyers, even politicians couldn't do. Like the time over in Africa, there was an epidemic. People were getting bitten by tsetse flies. Now, if you know anything about tsetse flies, you'll know they carry the sleeping sickness. If you get bitten by one, you fall asleep and you don't wake up. Well, people were falling asleep all over down there. They were shaking them, they were throwing ice water on their heads, they were slapping them. They must have used a ton of smelling salts. Nothing worked. So finally they called Phil Harmonic and his fabulous orchestra. Phil and the orchestra hopped a plane, and when they got off, they couldn't believe their eyes. People were sleeping on the streets, sleeping in their cars, sleeping on the stairs, sleeping on the stage. And nobody even had their pajamas on. Phil knew just what to do. He said, "Brass section, play me your wildest, most blood-curdling reveille." Before you could say Rip Van Winkle, I started popping up and all over the city. Hands started flailing, feet started kicking. People started jumping up and dancing right there in the street. Pretty soon the energy level was so high, they were thinking of disconnecting all the power plants, just running the place on people power. Philharmonic sounded the alarm and saved the day. But not only could he wake people up, he was pretty good at calming people down too. Like that time over in the Ozark Mountains, in a little place called Possum County, the Smith family and the Jones family, they'd been feuding for decades. Nobody could even remember why the fight started. All they'd know is a Smith would see a Jones in the street, yell something, a Jones would yell back. Pretty soon they'd be swinging. Next thing you know, a full-scale riot would break out. The sheriff had just about given up. Nobody could get anything done with the constant fighting going on. Hospitals were so full of bruised and battered bodies, they didn't have room to deliver any new babies. If they didn't do something soon, Possum County would wipe itself right off the map. So the sheriff wrote a letter to Philharmonic. Well, Phil and the band took the first train south. Then they had to put everything on trucks. Finally, they loaded all the musical instruments on the back of pack mules. And when they got to the top of that mountain, they were smack dab in the middle of the biggest brawl in years. People slugging it out all over the place. Babies screaming. Bullets whizzing by your head so close you can feel the wind. Phil didn't waste a second. He said, "String section, play me your most beautiful, syrupy, soupy love melody." So those cellos started in, and the basses came in on top. Those violins let go of the tune, so serene, it just blended into the air and wafted up over that crowd. When that music came down on the ears of that angry mob, beautiful things started happening. Just as a Smith was about to cuss out a Jones, his insult would turn into a compliment. Just as a Jones was about to punch out a Smith, his fist would turn into a handshake. Pretty soon, Smiths and Joneses were talking to each other. even marrying each other. From that day on, Possum County was the most peaceful place in the Ozarks. All because of Phil Harmonic. Under Phil's baton, music became a powerful force for the good of humankind. His oboes could play a pitch so perfect it could purify a polluted river. And his flutes could call a whole endangered species of bird back to a safe refuge. And his drummers could play a beat so strong that thousands of people would begin working together for the common good. But Phil and the orchestra were getting kind of tired of being on the road all the time. They wanted to settle down. Then one day, after a concert in California, a man came to Phil's dressing room. Come in.
Mr. Harmonic, my name is Spellbug, and I hope you can help me.
You see, I make movies, but lately people just haven't been coming to my movies. Nobody laughs anymore, nobody cries anymore, nobody gets excited. They say you're the man to talk to if you've got a problem, and I sure have a problem. Well, Phil thought for a minute. I know what you need. You need music to go with those movies, and I'm the man to write it. Well, I'll try anything at this point, Spellbug said, and if you think you can do it, the job is yours. So Phil started writing music for Spellbug's movies. He wrote fast music for the chase scene. Beautiful music for the love stories. And sad music for the tragedies. And funny music for the comedies. And people started coming back. They laughed, they cried, and it was Phil's music that did it. And the studio took good care of Phil's musicians, too. Phil and his friends had finally found a home. Everything seemed great for a couple years. Phil wrote music for Spellbug's movies, and occasionally they would take a little trip to save the world. Then one day, a man came into Spellbug's office. Come in. Mr. Spellbug, my name is Sid Digital, and I hear you have the best music in all of Hollywood. I hear you even have your own symphony orchestra. Well, that's true, and we're very proud of them. I bet they take up a lot of room. I bet they cost a lot to feed. Well, they do, but they're worth it. Then Sid leaned over Spellbug's desk like he was going to tell him a big secret, and he said, "What would you say if I told you that I could make all the music that your symphony orchestra could make, but you wouldn't need all those musicians, and you wouldn't need all those musical instruments. You wouldn't even need Phil Harmonic. All you need is me and my computer." He said, "Let me get Phil up here." And Phil came up, he introduced the men. "Phil, this is Sid Digital. He says he can make all the music that your orchestra can make with a computer." Phil said, that can't be true. Music doesn't come from a machine. It comes from the hearts and minds of human beings." "Oh, yeah?" Sid said. "We'll see where music comes from. Saturday night, Symphony Hall, 8 o'clock. We'll let the audience decide who makes the best music. That is, if you got the guts to face me, Harmonic."
Well, you bet I'll be there, Phil said.
The stage was set. All week long, Phil rehearsed with his orchestra. All week long, Sid programmed his computer. The word went out, the biggest musical showdown of the century was gonna take place. Saturday night, Symphony Hall was packed. The curtain opened. There was Phil Harmonic and his fabulous orchestra on one side of the stage, and Sid Digital and his computer on the other side. The lights went down. The crowd got so quiet, you could almost hear the moon coming up outside. Phil stepped to the podium, leaned over to his musicians so only they could hear, and he said, "Okay, let's show them what a symphony orchestra sounds like." And with a wave of his hand, they played a melody so poignant. finished, he looked at Sid and said, "Okay, Sid, can your computer do that?" Sid just gave a smirk and hit him. To the amazement of everyone, that computer played the same tune! Beginner's luck, Phil said, with a forced kind of confidence. Listen to my woodwinds. He saw the audience laugh and he knew he had him and he said, "Okay, what about that, Sid?" "My brass! Nobody can beat my brass," he said. He looked over at Sid. Sid just hit that button again. "My drummers will save me. They always do," Phil said. "Yeah!" He knew he had him then. He could feel the excitement in the crowd from that. Nobody beats Phil's drummers. He looked at Sid and said, "Hey, what'd you think of that, Sid?" Sid just said, "Yeah, pretty good, Phil, but check this out." People were moving and grooving in their seats. He couldn't believe it. They were actually dancing to a computer! Yuck! "Okay," Phil said, "no more fooling around. Everybody together." The whole orchestra burst into song. It was thrilling to hear all those musicians at one time. But then, just a few measures into the piece, Sid stole the melody away. Then Phil took it back. Then Sid, then Phil, then Sid, then Phil. To make things even more intense, right about now, a storm broke out outside, and you could hear thunder and lightning crashing over the top of the theater, rain pouring down on the roof. But now Phil and his band were getting tired. They couldn't keep up that inhuman orchestra. That Sid Digital was... Finally, Phil just didn't have the strength to take the melody back. Then that computer took off, using all its unnatural sound to propel the music into a new dimension. Higher and higher it rose to the peak of its sequential rise. All of a sudden, a blinding light. Everything went black. Total darkness. Then somebody on stage lit a match. It was Phil Harmonic. He had a candle. Phil stepped up to the podium again, looked over at his orchestra. In the light, you could see Sid over there kicking his computer, trying to get it going. Ha ha ha. Phil just said, "Let's take it from letter A." The crowd went wild! There was no doubt who won that contest. But when the applause died down, Phil went over to Sid and said, "You know, Sid, that is an incredible machine you got there. If it hadn't been for that lightning storm, I don't know what would have happened. But I do know there's some things only real live musicians can do. And a computer will never replace a symphony orchestra. But there might be room in my symphony orchestra for a computer if you'd like to join up." Sid said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, fire that thing up. Let's see what happens when we work together." So Sid got that computer going. And that's the way it was. Phil Harmonic and his fabulous orchestra were even more fabulous now because they had a computer. And Sid Digital, he got his job working for the movies. So next time you go to the theater, listen and see if you can hear Phil and Sid working together in the background making the music. Because I guarantee you, they'll both be there